What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about why the UK uses the metric system. So, as an American, I, of course, use imperial units, the proper units of measurement, like gallons and pounds and Fahrenheit. but joking aside, I do know that the UK uses the metric system. But to be honest, most of us Americans don't really know much about it or how it works or what the different measurements really mean. Like what's a kilometer? How far is a kilometer? I don't know. But so today I just want to understand why the UK has decided to use the metric system. So, let's take a look.
If you've ever wondered why Americans are out there using inches and feet and quarts and gallons, well, most of the world has moved on to centimeters and meters and kilos and liters. There's more to this story than you might realize.
You know, that's another thing. She makes a great point here. I truthfully didn't realize for the longest time growing up here in America as a little American child and even into my adult life a bit, I didn't realize that we are the strange ones. We use the strange system of measurement. I thought, oh, there's countries out there that use the metric system. I wonder who they are. That's kind of weird, you know? Meters and okay, a couple of countries use that. Sure. No, like a lot of countries use the metric system, and even fewer countries still cling to the imperial system of measurement. Of course, the United States still does. I just thought that was funny that me and a lot of Americans, we think that our measurement system is the normal one, whereas I think we're kind of in the minority here compared to the rest of the world that's actually using the metric system. More people are using the metric system. That's what I've had to come to terms with. So, yeah.
So let's get our basics straight first. The story begins with the British imperial system. It's a system of weights and measurements used in Britain around the time of colonization in the U.S.
Whoa, wait, huh? What? Huh? The British imperial system? British imperial system? Did Britain use the imperial system at one point? British yard, 2 feet, 1 foot, 6 inches? Wait. So, the imperial system, did it start with Britain? Is that why America uses it? That would make sense. Oh my gosh, see? I don't even know this history and stuff. Okay.
US. It, in and of itself, was sort of a tangled weave of weights and measures, and it wasn't officially defined until the British Weights and Measures Act in 1824.
Oh, okay.
But these units were still what was used in the British Empire in various ways in the 1700s.
It started with Britain. Britain is the reason we are the way we are in America. It's your fault. And now you've left us behind. Oh, you've gone to the metric system and we're just left holding this old bag of imperial units, inches and stuff. A whole bunch of inches.
The British bring these units to the colonies in America, and the colonists do what they do. They measure things in imperial units, they take over Native American land. All is sort of well.
Wow.
Except at the time, France is developing the metric system. And by the early 1800s, the French are like, okay, we're going for it. We are about to revolutionize measurement and start using the metric system and decimals and things divisible by 10.
I didn't know that, France invented the metric system. That's really cool. That's an interesting fact. I didn't know who was responsible for that, but France. I would say thanks, France, but you haven't done us any favors because we're not even using the metric system. Well, actually, in America, our one introduction to the metric system is in our American science classes where we are forced to measure things in metric units, like, I don't know, grams, liters, milliliters, stuff like, maybe, not even Celsius. Like, Celsius is just, doesn't even exist. I don't know if it exists, because we just use Fahrenheit for everything. But in science class, I remember, like, first being introduced to, like, a centimeter and stuff like that. So, Americans get a little bit of a sort of introduction to it and how it works based on tens, which seems very clever. Like, if we're being completely honest here, the metric system, I hate to admit it, but it has to be better, right? Like, it's just mathematically more logical, it makes more sense. Calculating between, like, meters and kilometers. I don't know how far a kilometer is, like, in my mind, but I know it's 1,000 meters, right? Right? That's how that works?
The UK, for the record, is not immediately on board. You'll notice that the date of the Weights and Measurement Act is 1824. So at that point, the Brits are like, thanks, but no thanks, France. We're standardizing our own measurements rather than getting on board with you.
I did not know that the UK used and invented the British imperial system, and that is what us Americans are still using to this day. We, of course, learn all the measurements here, imperial measurements, but we don't learn about the history of where it comes from. I didn't know that.
Now, the US, funnily enough, had a tiny bit of interest in the metric system at this point by way of a man named Thomas Jefferson, the Secretary of State at the time. He had heard about the French system and was intrigued, but two things happened. Firstly, pirates. Honestly, pirates. He asked his contacts in France to send him the object that was meant to be the standard for weighing things in metric, which was the 1 kilogram. So a scientist named Joseph Dombey was sent off to Jefferson carrying this weight. Except, and I am not making this up, on his way across the Atlantic with a 1 kilogram object in his pocket, a storm blew him off course into the Caribbean Sea, and guess who's in the Caribbean Sea? Obviously, pirates.
What? Huh? Okay. Well, here's a fun fact. America almost we almost had a chance to switch over to the metric system at one point. But we didn't, because when we asked to have a kilogram sent to us to know what a kilogram was, it was sent over in a ship that was blown off course and captured by pirates. And that's why we don't use the metric system in America. Got it. Okay. Sure.
They took him prisoner, he didn't survive sadly, and the stuff in the ship was auctioned off, so the 1 kilogram never made it to Jefferson for him to consider or to help him try and convince his fellow countrymen about this new way of measuring.
No way. We could have been using the metric system right now. We could have been part of the metric club. Instead, we're still out here measuring stuff in yards.
So if neither the UK nor the US were interested in the metric system at first, why did the UK adopt it while the US still resisted?
Yeah.
In the UK, there have been numerous recommendations throughout the 1800s and early 1900s to adopt metric. Much of Europe was adopting to metric around this time period, which is of course the closest geographical partner to the British, and when it came to trade and science, it was becoming more obvious that switching to a standardized system that everyone else was using was going to help streamline things and keep Britain involved.
That makes sense. That makes sense. It's actually because the UK is in Europe. Everyone was doing it. Everyone was doing the cool, hip, new thing. Switching over to this metric system still doesn't sound that great. Like multiples of 10, yeah, whatever. I'm still out here desperately trying to defend our terrible imperial units. But the UK is just like, it was convenient to measure things in the same units that everyone else was around you. Here in America, we're over here doing our own thing. So we didn't get the memo, I guess. Like that it's funny. That's literally how things worked. Like it was convenient for the UK, and the US, we're just out here like, I don't know, we're just going to use imperial units, I guess, cuz we don't see anyone else using metric over here.
There was the 1897 Weights and Measure Act, but all it did was legalize metric for use in trade, not make it mandatory. Metrication or metrification, you can use either, as I've discovered when researching this video, doesn't really start in the UK until the 1960s.
The 1960s. I didn't realize it was like so, like, I don't know, recently. Like the 1960s, that was a while ago. You know, that was like over 60 years ago now. But, you know, that means there's people alive today in the UK who used imperial units and were alive when the UK switched to metric. Like the 1960s, I figured that the UK has been using the metric system like forever. I didn't even know that the UK invented the British imperial system that we still use. This is really interesting, actually.
1965, at this point, the British government is well aware that they do not want to put the country at a commercial disadvantage, and the war period in the 1900s is now over. So they can go back to worrying less about whether the country is going to still be standing and worry more about whether they should use miles or kilometers. The initial idea was to make it a 10-year program. Some of it was pushed quite heavily and was easy to see change, like how in rugby, the meter lines replaced the yard lines.
Wow. So this was literally a transition the UK did from imperial to metric over the course of many years. This could be a blueprint for how America could do this. I still don't quite understand. Like, as nostalgic I think our imperial system is. I've spent my whole life measuring things in inches and feet and yards and Fahrenheit and pounds and gallons and pints. But still, I'd be willing, I think, to switch over just because I've heard how much more logical the metric system is, and because of how much of the other world uses the system. I just feel like us Americans are like stuck in the past, and we almost are like strangely proud of our weird measurements, and we don't want to change it because we're like, yeah, I like that there's 12 inches in a foot and 3 feet in a yard and this many, you know, we're oddly like okay with it. But the UK switched over. It took a while, but you did it. So we could do it too.
And some of it was softer or more voluntary at first. There's one area, speed limit signs, which never even happened. It was scheduled to take place in 1973, but as you might know, if you've seen a British speed limit sign recently, they're still in miles.
Really? I didn't know that. I assumed they were in kilometers. What? A British speed limit sign is in miles. British people measure stuff in miles? Wait. How does that work? So it's like a mixed system? There's like some imperial, some metric? Really? That's, in a way, that's even more confusing to me. In America, at least it's all imperial. In the UK, it's like a mixture? Really?
Other industries changed in the coming years, with pharmaceuticals and paper in 1971, the paint and steel industry in 1972, textile and clothing manufacturers in 1974, and, wait for it, the cheese wholesaling industry in 1978.
Okay.
The carpet retailers tried to get cheeky in 1977 when they went back on a deal to switch to metric units because it made the carpet look cheaper if they displayed it in per square yard rather than per square meter, but legislation brought them in line.
Right, it is funny how freaking close a meter and a yard are in measure. Like, they're almost the same distance, just by coincidence. A meter and a yard. But not.
Office stopped using Fahrenheit for weather in 1970, and there are fascinating stories in each industry about this process. So
the UK does use Celsius. The UK uses miles, but not Fahrenheit. Celsius. Okay.
For instance, petrol eventually changed from gallon to liter because the petrol pump designs at this point had only been designed to physically be able to price fuel at less than £2 per unit. Once the price of petrol rose, the industry requested that they be allowed to sell fuel by the liter because if they did this instead of the gallon, they could reduce the unit price and extend the lifespan of the existing petrol pumps.
Wow.
However,
Okay. And the UK uses liters, of course. Okay.
while much has changed, the imperial system is still a part of many people's lives in the UK, particularly if you learned measurements before the switch to metric. You'll find metric like grams in British recipes, but you'll also find that you still order a pint. And people talk about driving typically here in miles. Many still measure their height in feet, like 5 foot, 6 foot 2, etc.
What?
So it's a bit of a mix, but for
What? I'm so confused. I did not realize it was such a mixture of units in the UK. I don't even know how it works anymore. Certain things are measured in metric, and other things, like height, is still feet, distance is still miles. And for some people, like I was imagining, for some Brits, you might be old enough to remember when everything was imperial units, because it wasn't that long ago that you switched.
From an industry perspective, the UK uses the metric system and is certainly considered a country that has gone metric.
Okay.
The USA, on the other hand,
Okay.
still uses an imperial-based system, and we are still taught in feet, inches, yards, pints, gallons, etc. Industries in the US that do need to conform for wider purposes, like the scientific community, do use metric. And
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess there's places in the US or certain categories of industries that have to use metric, but basically Americans are hopeless at the metric system. Like, I think what we're okay at are centimeters. I have a rough idea what a liter is because we sell soda in 2-liter bottles. I don't know. That's about it. I don't know like anything about Celsius or kilometers or a gram or I don't know.
as far as the future, in a recent poll, only 32% of Americans cared about going metric, and there are no major rumblings or pushes or nudges for the USA to go metric outside of what it already has done. I would also argue we
Yeah.
have bigger problems.
Yeah, this makes sense to me, actually. Like, personally, my personal opinion, I think it'd be cool to go metric. I've heard a lot of good things. From what I learned in science class, it just literally makes more logical sense. You can convert between the units a lot easier. More of the world uses metric. There's basically every reason to go metric. The UK did it. You know, you made the effort and did it. Why can't America? I don't know. Apparently only 30% of us even care about this. I'm not that surprised, but I care. And I thought this was actually really, really cool to learn about. I totally understand why the UK went metric now. It's actually cool that you managed to do it, like, you know, only 60 years ago. You actually basically changed the entire country's measurement system, which is pretty amazing. So it's actually really cool to learn about. This video is by Girl Gone London. I gotta give it a like. Because I did like this. This was actually really cool to learn about the British perspective on the metric system. And it's your fault we're using the imperial system. That's what I'm going with. But I enjoyed this. Anyway, if you enjoyed this as well, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment with your thoughts on the metric system in the UK. Do you like it? Do you think we're strange for not using it? Should we switch? That'd be really fun to hear about, actually. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to the UK and UK culture, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.